Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargav, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we talk about the UP government claiming to sign an MOU with a university that does not actually exist. We also talk about 72 stolen antiques and sculptures that are set to return to India. But first, we talk about COVID-19. On Wednesday, after reviewing the rise of COVID-19 cases in China, the Union Health Minister Mansukh Mandavia requested people to follow COVID-appropriate behavior, like wearing masks, maintaining social distance, washing hands frequently, and getting vaccinated. And yesterday, he told states that they should increase vigilance and the administration of booster doses. In this segment, we speak to Indian Express's Anona Dutt, who reports on health for the paper, about how worried we should be about COVID cases rising in India, the threat of the BF variant, and also what the health minister said about Rahul Gandhi's Bharat Jodo Yatra. So, Anona, what kind of instructions has the health ministry given out so far?
So after there were, reports of these rising cases in China and a few other countries, the Union Health Minister took a review meeting with the senior officials, and the Prime Minister took a meeting on Thursday as well about the COVID situation in the country. So the precautions that the ministry has said right now, they've urged the people to wear masks again. They have said get vaccinated if you haven't. And although our first and second dose coverage is pretty good, the third dose still remains low. So from the data that I remember, we had 27% adult population being vaccinated with the third dose, that 75-day free campaign. And after that, another 96 lakh people have got it. So that was another thing that the ministry urged. But when it comes to what the government is doing, they have increased surveillance. They've asked all states to send all positive samples for genome sequencing right now. So our genome sequencing numbers had gone down really because, of course, the number of cases had gone down. And the surveillance methodology was such that you had to send some samples from the international travelers, if there were any clusters being formed of infections from there, and some from the identified sentinel sites. So now the government has said all positive samples should be sent to the, INSACOG laboratories for genome sequencing. The second thing that they have said is they had stopped in November end randomly testing international travelers. They've started that again. So these are the changes that have happened, but no restrictions per se, like no containment zones or restrictions in travel have been placed right now.
And Anona, approximately how many cases are we reporting on a daily basis right now?
So even though there has been an increase in cases, say in China, which just relaxed its zero COVID policy, and some other countries, we have not seen an increasing trend yet. We are still on a decline. So the last data that was available in the health minister's meeting was an average of 158 cases daily during the week ending on December 19th. So we have very few cases being reported in the country, but also, a lot of people do get tested using home kits. So that's not 158 is not a absolute figure, but then it shows that the transmission is very low in the country right now.
Also, the variant that seems to be causing a surge in China is BF7. And now 2 cases of this variant have been reported in India as well. So could you talk about what we know about this variant so far?
So BF7 is a sub-variant of Omicron, BA5. So, it's a Omicron essentially with certain differences in its structures. So what we know so far is that BF7 was first highlighted when it started causing cases in the United States and United Kingdom earlier in October. So it started replacing their dominant variant there, which is why it came into prominence and we started to watch out for this variant. But the 2 cases that have been reported so far, one case came in September and one in November, and it doesn't seem to have spread. So just because of the sheer number of people who have been vaccinated and who have also got the infections a couple of times, the variant doesn't seem to be spreading in India.
So even experts aren't really worried that what's happening in China could lead to a possible surge here?
So basically, China had not been exposed to the virus for a long time because of the lockdown, and they did not see Omicron wave, which we have already seen. And even when Hong Kong had lifted its zero COVID policy, they saw an increase in Omicron cases. And it's the same thing that China is witnessing. And that's what the experts say. It's unlikely that we'll have a huge wave like we saw earlier because most of our population has already had the infection. In fact, they've had the Omicron infection, which is a good protector against severe disease or hospitalization with another Omicron variant. So it's unlikely to cause rush to hospitals and people dying. That's what the experts think right now. But the challenge with China is that it's a huge population getting infected with this variant. And the more the virus multiplies, the more there is a possibility that it will mutate. So that is something that experts are worried about, that there might be some mutation that arises from China, which may then cause another wave. But that's not a very likely possibility, but it might happen because so many people are getting infected.
So probably a good idea for those who haven't got a booster shot yet to get it now?
Yes, it's always a good idea to get the booster shot. Stay protected.
Also, Anona, right now we talked about the BF7 variant. But there is another variant that seems to be in the news right now, and that is the Omicron XBB variant. And now there is a lot of talk that we should be worried about it. There are also WhatsApp forwards that are going around mentioning it. So tell us about this variant. Is it really a cause for concern?
So XBB is a recombinant variant, which means two of Omicron variants have combined to form XBB. The thing is, it was detected in India 2-3 months back, and now it is the dominant variant in India anyway. So of the samples that were sequenced in India, in November, XBB accounted for 65% of the samples. So it's the dominant variant right now, and we haven't seen any increase in hospitalization, severe disease or death. So clearly it doesn't have that impact, but it is spreading. It's the dominant variant.
Also, Anona, in the middle of all this, the Health Minister Mansukh Mandavia on Tuesday wrote to Congress leaders Rahul Gandhi and Ashok Gehlot asking them to either follow all COVID-19 protocols during the Bharat Jodo Yatra or suspend it in the national interest. So firstly, when he says follow COVID-19 protocols, what all would it involve?
So they said follow COVID appropriate behavior, which is basically, using a mask, maintaining social distance, washing your hand, getting vaccinated. So these are the general advisories which have been in place even after the Disaster Management Act provisions were lifted. So these would generally be the, behaviors that you have to follow. I don't see anything additional that you could do in a yatra.
Right. And could you talk about how the Congress party has reacted to this directive?
So Congress party has said that, there is physical parliament going on right now. There are yatras being undertaken by other parties and that is being allowed. Then there's a BJP rally in Karnataka. Everything is allowed. They have also said that, we are traveling in flights without masks anymore. You don't follow these protocols within the parliament. So why is Bharat Jodo Yatra the focus?
And next we talk about Uttar Pradesh. Earlier this month, the UP government announced that they had signed a Memorandum of Understanding, a MOU, with an international university to build a knowledge smart city at a cost of $42 billion or about 35,000 crore rupees. This university, according to the official statement, was Austin University in San Francisco, USA. The state government said that they had signed many such MOUs in an effort to attract investment from foreign countries. But later an Indian Express investigation found out that the Austin University in San Francisco does not actually exist. In this segment, we speak to Indian Express's Saurav Roy Burman, who broke the story. So Saurav, begin by telling us about this MOU that the UP government first said was signed by the Austin University in San Francisco. What do we know about it?
So the Uttar Pradesh government is holding an investors summit in February next year. And so from the government, 8 teams of ministers and officials are currently visiting 18 countries across the world to look for investments. So one such team was in the United States earlier this month. And in San Francisco, this particular MOU was signed between the government of UP and the Austin University, under which the promoters of the group proposes to invest some 42 billion US dollars in phases to build what they call a knowledge smart city spread over 5,000 acres of land. And I mean, they're yet to identify the land. So that is the MOU in a nutshell.
Okay, so this MOU was signed on December 18th, and then the UP government announced it. Now, sort of you accessed some very relevant documents pertaining to this matter. Talk about what these documents revealed.
So, the documents essentially show that Austin University is not really a university. I mean, it obtained an approval to operate as a non-accredited private post-secondary education institution, they call it in the US. So they got this approval way back in 2011. But then nothing really came up apart from a website. So they have a bureau for private post-secondary education in California. It's like, say, our UGC or AICT. It's a regulatory body. And that bureau has been issuing notices to the Austin group over the years, including this year in 2022. And this year they also carried out an inspection, physical inspection of the university at the registered address. Then they found out that there's nothing there. I mean, there's no campus, nothing.
Okay, so no university building and no office at the address that was provided to obtain the license.
Yeah, the thing is, so the officials found out that there's no university there, and the entire building, it was locked from the inside and there was nothing inside. So if you look at the records from, say, 2016 onwards till 2020, it says the number of students. So every institution has to give a submission to the US administration. So in that data sheet, they have to list the number of students, faculty members, courses, and everything. But in the submissions made by the Austin group, there was nothing, 0 students, 0 faculty every year.
Now, in your story, you mentioned that Ashraf Al-Mustafa, the founder of this said university, was asked to give a testimony based on these allegations. What exactly did he say?
Yeah, he justified it, the entire thing, saying, I mean, due to COVID, the campus had to be shut down, it had to be shifted elsewhere. But his testimony was dismissed, as not credible. And he was actually fined. I mean, the Austin University was fined some $9,900. And yeah, it was not accepted, his testimony. And his license was revoked. So the Austin University, the license which was given to them in 2011, was revoked. And that license became invalid a few days before this MOU was signed. So they don't really have a license to operate in the United States anymore.
And sort of what does the state government have to say about signing an MOU with a university that does not exist, that does not have a license?
I mean, when we reached out to the UP government, the response that we got is essentially that, we haven't really signed the MOU with the Austin University, but it's a separate group called the Austin Consultancy Group.
Okay, so after saying that the MOU was signed by the Austin University in San Francisco, the state government now said that no, actually we signed it with the Austin Consulting Group. So are these two related in any way?
So yeah, we tried digging. So it turns out that the promoter of both the groups is the same person essentially, Ashraf Ali Mustafa. And we also spoke to him. We had a lengthy interview with this person. And Mr. Mustafa told us that he is the promoter of both the groups and he owns over 50% in the consultancy group as well, which he claims to have formed very recently, keeping the upcoming projects in mind, including the Knowledge Smart City in UP. And we also asked him about the valuation of his company. And he told us it runs into some 10 billion USD, but then he did not really give us any documentary proof to back his claim. There is no evidence whatsoever, even in the public domain.
And sort of the MOU, which of course is not legally binding, mentioned that the so-called Austin University was interested in investing $42 billion in building this knowledge smart city. Do we know what they said about how they would raise this kind of money?
Yeah, we tried asking that as well. And the response we got is that, so they will not be investing the entire amount at one go. So initially in the first phase, they plan to invest some 7 billion USD, of which 1 billion USD will be invested by the consultancy group itself. And the remaining amount they plan to mobilize from various investors and banks in the US.
And sort of now that there is a spotlight on this controversy and we know that this university does not exist, what do you think happens now?
See, it remains to be seen. Now, Mr. Mostafa also told me that he will be in UP in January to look for land because they are yet to identify that land parcel. They require some 5,000 acres under the proposal. So he plans to be in UP next month. So we'll see whether, it remains to be seen whether he actually visits UP, whether the government takes forward the entire thing.
Also, sort of, was Uttar Pradesh the only state considered by Mr. Mostafa's group, or has he been in talks with other states as well?
So, yeah, he told me that he had visited India in 2019 also. There was one investor summit in Uttarakhand, and he was there in that summit where he made sort of a similar proposal to the Uttarakhand government. But the Uttarakhand government could not give him land. That is completely his version, that the Uttarakhand government could not offer him more than 20 acres, whereas he needed much more. So yeah, the plan did not go through.
And in the end, we talk about Indian antiques and sculptures. Over the years, thousands of antiquities that were stolen from India have been discovered in countries around the world. Many of these are centuries old and are illegally smuggled out of the country. Now, the Archaeological Survey of India, or ASI, which comes under the Union Ministry of Culture, is the one responsible for bringing these antiquities back to India after they are found. And this is what is soon going to happen to a total of 72 antiques and sculptures, which will be repatriated to India from about 11 different countries. In this segment, Indian Express's Divya A. joins us to talk about the process of bringing these antiquities back and what will happen to them once they arrive in India. So, Divya, begin by telling us, what do we know about these 72 antiquities?
So, these 72 antiquities that we are talking about, they are just awaiting their return to India. They have been, for all practical purposes, handed over to the respective embassies and consulates in those countries. So they are in the custody of Indian government. Only thing is the procedural thing about them physically arriving in India. And these include some antique idols and sculptures that were notified for return by different countries where they were discovered to have been smuggled or stolen and sent through illegal means. But they are just yet to arrive in India. And as far from what we know, these include 8 pieces from Australia, 17 from Singapore, 9 from the UK, 31 from the US, and 1 each from other countries like Bangladesh, Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, Switzerland, and the Netherlands.
And Divya, over the years, many such stolen artifacts have been returned to India. Could you talk a bit about them and how the ASI gets involved in it?
So recently, in fact, in the last 7-8 years, there have been various instances where Indian artifacts that were stolen from various temples or other places were discovered abroad. And when you find out that this is the specific artifact on which an FIR was already registered in India and you verify that it is the same piece, there is this whole process of repatriation that is set rolling. So accordingly, in various countries have moved ahead to send these pieces back to India on finding that these were illegally reaching their country from India and were being sold at various auctions or by private dealers. So that is nothing out of the ordinary. The only thing is, once these pieces reach the respective embassy, then ASI has to move in, which is through the Ministry of Culture, and then they have to kind of release funds for their arrival in India.
Right, and recently BJP MP Dushyant Singh asked questions about this in the Lok Sabha. He asked whether there has been any delay in getting these artifacts. And while the culture minister put on record that there has not been a delay this time, could you tell us a bit more about how funds are allocated for this whole process and why there have been delays in the past?
See, the funds for repatriation are spent from the ASI's budgetary allocation, every year. And ASI, which we all know functions under the Ministry of Culture, is the nodal agency to actually retrieve these stolen and illegally exported art objects. So once the object is with the Indian consulate, then the next step is for the ASI to spend on the logistics for their return. See, in the last few years, or in the last few months, I would say, there were reports that administrative delay on part of ASI is holding up the arrival of at least 9 important artifacts stolen and smuggled out of the country over the decades from foreign countries. So Indian authorities abroad have got possession of these articles, some of which are dating to 8th century, 15th century in countries like the US, UK and Italy. But it is the procedural delays on the part of the ASI to actually get them back in India and send them to the respective states from where they originally belonged.
And Divya, once these antiques arrive back in India, what exactly happens to them?
Once the antiquities are back in India, they physically arrive in India. Then ASI is the custodian. It goes to ASI. And then from there, the ASI decides, maybe in consultation with the respective state governments, whether they have to be handed back to the states. ASI has also created a special display gallery at Delhi's Purana Killa for some of these confiscated and repatriated objects. So some of these objects are displayed on a rotation basis at the Purana Killa gallery, while some are also sent back to the respective original place of location, and other antiquities stay with the ASI in their custody.
Also, Divya, on a separate note, India has said that it will display 20 antiquities during the first culture group meeting of the G20, the Intergovernmental Forum, in February next year. Why is the spotlight on the antiquities that time?
See, one of the very important points is to talk about the agenda of the G20 culture track. So the G20 culture track also has an important segment on protection and restitution of cultural property. Repatriation of antiquities comes under that. So in keeping with that, when India holds its first G20 culture track meeting in February in Khajuraho, the ASI or the Government of India is going to hold an exhibition of some of this cultural property that India got back from other countries. While we know that ASI is still drawing up a list of what exactly are the artifacts that are going to be displayed during the exhibition, but we know for sure that some 20 items will be put on display, and it will be interesting to watch out from what countries these items have been returned, and are these G20 countries, are these other countries? That is something still we are trying to keep track of.
You were listening to Three Things by The Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.